Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey joins us. And I think you're in every legal fight. I think I touched like everything that I just mentioned. You are in a legal fight about it right now. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you back. I just wanted to get your thoughts real quick on some of these mask mandates and this other stuff that's creeping back because they say, oh, there's a new variant. It's probably super infectious. Everybody's got to cover up again. They're pushing it.
Oh, they absolutely are. They hate freedom. But here in Missouri, we're going to fight to protect freedom. We're always going to put freedom first. Those are individual decisions. Those aren't government decisions. And no unelected bureaucrats are going to mask our children or anyone else in the state of Missouri as long as I'm AG.
It's amazing to me that even after all of the data that we have gotten over the past several years of how detrimental all of that was to young kids in schools, I mean, it set kids back academically, even just having faces covered with language, et cetera, that we're actually going to consider doing it again, and based on just as little evidence as we had last time with this new variant. If they try that Missouri, I mean, you're ready to stop it.
Ready, willing, and able to step up, say no, and fight back and use the court process to do exactly that. Again, we're going to put freedom first here in the state of Missouri. Individuals are capable of making their own healthcare decisions absent government intervention. And I would also point out that, when it comes to the left's attack on our freedom, it's never about truth. It's always about power. They don't care what's actually working or not. They care about controlling our lives. And there's a reason I don't live in North Korea. Our founding fathers are turning over in their graves that we would so quickly, hand over this legacy of freedom that's been passed down to us by previous generations, because there's a new illness, a new virus. And certainly it's in times of crisis that we must remain most vigilant to protect our constitutional rights. The Constitution exists to protect us from government. The government exists to protect our rights. And that's what I'm going to do as long as I'm working in the government as the state's attorney general.
There you go. Talking Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey. So I know that you're in court today. This has been a lawsuit that has been covering this judge that's going to determine whether or not to block the new restrictions on gender mutilation. I don't like to say the word gender affirming because I'm like, if you're affirming, why do you need to affirm anything? It's experimental, unnecessary, medically unnecessary surgery for youth. This is something that this judge is considering. You're in court about it because it takes also. Looking at my notes, it bars puberty blockers, etc., this hormonal abuse. Tell us about this, because I don't see how anyone can argue, how the state could argue that this is informed consent, or any state. Like in California, they try to push this. Oregon, it's not informed consent because there's no long-term studies that show what happened after kids are subjected to hormonal abuse, or even what that looks like after they've had this unnecessary surgery, the care.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's not healthcare at all. It's sterilization of children who are suffering from gender dysphoria. And I'm all about protecting children. I want Missouri to be the safest state in the nation for children. I'm a parent. I'm a foster parent who's adopted children out of the foster care system because I have a heart for protecting children. I've dedicated my professional career to it. And that's what defending this statute's all about. I would also point out that, at the end of the day, in our Republican democracy, when our General Assembly passes a statute and the governor signs it into law, that's two branches of government saying it's constitutional. So the court should be really deferential to this policy position that's codified in statute by the policy branches of government. I would also point out that what the other side is arguing is that there's a constitutional right to sterilize kids. That doesn't appear in the Constitution anywhere. And the other point I would make is that the Equal Protection Clause, which is the basis of their claim, the jurisprudence for the past 100 years on the Equal Protection Clause is based on immutable characteristics, and yet the plaintiffs are arguing that gender is mutable. It undermines their own legal position, and that's why having a full hearing on the matter was so important to us, to shine the light of truth on this abomination and point out that this is nothing short of the attempt to sterilize kids, and we're going to stand up and fight to protect kids in the state of Missouri.
So as I understand it, if the law is able to take effect, the restrictions on hormonal abuse, again, I don't know how I'm not using the language of the media. It's not hormonal therapy. They have no idea what this does. The restrictions on hormonal abuse, the puberty blockers, all of that, that expires in 2027. The ban on the medically unnecessary surgery does not expire. What could happen? So this law takes effect because, we had the hospitals in St. Louis. I mean, it's my and Kane's hometown. We saw these medical facilities that were presenting this stuff as actual medical care when it's clearly not. What happens for those medical professionals that still engage in this experimentation?
Well, they're subject to civil suit. They're subject to punishment on licensure. They're not covered by the Medicaid state program. And so there's a lot of different penalties that we can use to go after folks that continue to abuse children after this ban on the sterilization of children goes into effect. But again, to your point, I mean, that's why we're fighting so hard in court and why it was so important to actually put on evidence and call live witnesses and make the plaintiff prove their case by putting on live witnesses. When we cross-examined the so-called experts from the other side, they had to admit exactly what you're positing, that there's no science to back this up. And any reports they were relying on are based on pseudoscience. And they completely neglected to look at the studies out of Europe that showed how dangerous and irreversible and deleterious the consequences were from these kinds of procedures. So again, it's about getting an open court and putting people on the record and making them own this and own the fact that it's not based on science. And so again, our hope and expectation is that the court will be deferential to the policy position codified in state statute that expresses the will of the people through their elected representatives.
You know, Kane said something to you on break when we were getting all set up. It's crazy that people are fighting you on this, that anyone is actually fighting to do this to kids.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, they love a utopian ideology more than they love children because they're putting the practical good of children as a backseat to some woke left-wing agenda. We're not going to let them experiment on kids here in the state of Missouri. I mean, how dare anyone tell these kids that God put them in the wrong body? We know he doesn't make
mistakes. That's body shaming. They're body shaming them.
That's right. Now, if somebody did that on Twitter, we would be lambasted for that. And yet it's okay for these woke left-wing ideologues to experiment on kids and harm them for the rest of their life, completely alter the course of their life to where they can't enjoy, aspects of adulthood that are reserved to adults because of decisions their parents and other folks made for them. It's absolutely ridiculous. I can't consent to my 5-year-old riding the front seat of my car because it's too dangerous. And yet somehow these folks want to be able to consent to their kids being sterilized. I mean, again, it's absolutely absurd that we live in this world, but I've dedicated my professional career to fighting to protect kids, and I'm not going to stop now.
There you go. We're talking to Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey on the puberty blocker suit that he's involved in right now. I also wanted to touch on two things because I want to hit the social media thing that you're still involved in. The president, he's got the student loan, the forcing taxpayers, except for small payments of I'm getting into some of the details here. They're looking at borrowers would pay zero, the cost of student loans, forcing taxpayers to cover all of this. It really is falling down to, ultimately, attorney generals of every single state to step into the void and protect taxpayers from this. What are you doing in Missouri?
Well, we fought Joe Biden. We're not going to let him stick working Missouri families with Ivy League debt. That would have cost the state of Missouri $44 million. We took that first round all the way up to the United States Supreme Court and were able to deliver a win to protect working Missouri families from being stuck with Ivy League debt that Joe Biden wants to saddle them with. And look, at the end of the day, it's about the rule of law and the constitutionality. Congress has the power of the purse, and the statutes do not authorize the president to redistribute wealth in this manner. And certainly we've held him accountable in the past and will continue to do so. But to your point, I mean, the Biden administration has the attitude that they get to do whatever they want until someone tells them to stop. And you're right. It's state attorneys general, Republican attorneys general, who I'm proud to partner with and have partnered with numerous times across a spectrum of different issues that go to court and hold President Biden accountable and defend the rest of us from this usurpation of power that was never granted to President Biden.
Yeah, that's very true. Last question for you. Missouri v. Biden. This is a huge case for people who are unaware, which I don't know how they would be, especially if they're involved in social media. The lawsuit against the administration that details really how the federal government's been working with the tech bros, working with social media companies to violate the rights of free speech. I mean, they're using them as state agents. Talk to us about this because I know you're awaiting the ruling from the Fifth Circuit, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I would say the verb I would use is the federal government coerced and demanded big tech social media silence conservative voices. It was viewpoint discrimination. We proved that in court. And we have to build a wall of separation between tech and state. The first brick of that wall was laid on July 4th when the district court sided with us based on the evidence we put on and ordered the Department of Justice and federal officials to stop violating Americans' First Amendment rights on big tech. The DOJ appealed. They think they have to be able to do this in the future, that they'll suffer irreparable harm if they aren't allowed to coerce big tech social media into viewpoint discrimination. And so we're at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The court expressed skepticism of the Department of Justice's position, and I'm confident in the ultimate outcome of that case. We expect a ruling within the next 20 days or so.
Oh, and we're excited for that one. And I have a feeling we'll probably be talking to you again when that comes down. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time today. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.